My name is Rhaea Stinn, and I've been powerlifting since 2003. I got into powerlifting because my brother had been doing it. I was playing a variety of other sports in high school and knew that getting stronger would help me in those sports. My brother had been competing in powerlifting for a couple of years. I'd been to some of his competitions, sort of knew what it was about, and I started going to the gym with him, started getting coached by his coach, Jeff Butt, who was in Moose Jaw at the time. And I did my first competition a month later, and then about 2 months after that, I did my first nationals, and really I've been competing in the sport ever since. Powerlifting is a strength sport composed of 3 lifts: the squat, bench press, and deadlift. You get 3 attempts at each of the lifts, and then your best attempt from each of those is added together for your total. With that total, you're ranked within your age and weight class in a competition to find out who the winner is. So I primarily lift as an equipped lifter, which means that I wear supportive equipment, really tight squat suits, bench shirts, deadlift suits that help lift a bit more weight. Whereas classic lifting can't wear those pieces of gear. It's the same 3 lifts: squat, bench, deadlift. You're judged the same, but just different pieces of equipment on the platform. One way to think of it is like pole vault versus high jump. Pole vault would be the equipped equivalent, using an implement to get higher over the bar, whereas high jump, you're just using your body to get over the bar. The goal of both is to jump as high as possible. So I started competing in 2003, did my first nationals that year. I did my first international meet in 2005, which was Sub-Junior Worlds. I placed second at that event, and that event was just in the USA in Indiana, so it wasn't that far to travel. 2006 was my last year as a sub-junior. Worlds that year were in Bulgaria. I was fortunate enough to win that year, so I was able to sort of check that achievement off of my list. And going to Bulgaria was it was my first time traveling overseas. It was a different country, different environment, sort of definitely opened my eyes. The thing that I remember most about Bulgaria is getting drug tested after that event, and it was probably about a 6-hour drug test because all of my samples were too dilute. And I remember being in this room by myself. Everybody else in the room spoke non-English, and just having to keep repeating my test over and over again until the specific gravity was high enough for the test. And that was before people would have cell phones and sort of thing. So just sitting there, I won this, was super excited, and then had to get pulled off to drug testing and had to wait a while until it was a satisfactory result. With powerlifting and the federation that I lift in, we're subject to drug testing. So that means I could be tested any day of the year. I have to provide WADA with my whereabouts. With a 1-hour window, they can always find me every day of the year. Typically, I'd say the last few years I've been getting tested probably 6 to 8 times a year. Most of those have been out of competition, where they show up at my house, usually at 6 a.m. To test me, and then a handful of times in competition as well. So 2 months after winning Sub-Junior Worlds in November of 2006, I was in a car accident. It was a severe car accident. I broke my femur, broke my ribs, had a severe concussion, was in the hospital for I think 9 days. So that obviously was a huge setback at that point in time. I still had powerlifting goals. I was moving into junior. I wanted to win Junior Worlds. And I think that it helped my recovery from the accident, was just having that motivation to get my body moving again, get back to the level I was at before. The accident obviously affected my start of my junior career. I did do Junior Worlds in 2007. Looking back on it, I probably wasn't ready to do it, either physically or mentally. But I did it, I put up a result, and still the goal at that point in time was to win juniors. I wanted to win sub-juniors, juniors, and at that point in time I had the vision of I want to win sub-juniors, juniors, open, and masters really. I was hoping that it would be a lifelong sport for me. Going into my last year as a junior, which was 2011, I had been on the podium a few times at Junior Worlds, but never finished with that gold. And we decided it would be a good idea to host Junior Worlds in my hometown in my last year as a junior. Awesome idea, super excited about it, but it just added to the pressure that I felt. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to win because it was my last opportunity. And then to be trying to do it at home in front of a home crowd, while also helping with the organizing committee of it. was a lot to put on my plate. That's probably one of the competitions where I've actually felt like the most pressure. And I think it all stems to just my family all being there, my friends being there in the audience to watch and not wanting to disappoint them. Even though I can take a step back and know that they would be proud of me regardless of what my performance was. I think a lot of times as athletes, we put the most pressure on ourselves. So that was a huge amount of pressure that I felt going into that event. I was able to sneak out a win. I had ended up going up to 84 plus. My weight had spiked a lot that summer, a lot to do with stress, I think, looking back on it, and just not prioritizing my nutrition at that point in time. So I was sort of deciding between 84 and 84 plus. We decided, I think my best shot was at 84 plus. So like the morning that I weighed in, I was drinking up to make sure I made weight over 84. And yeah, it worked out in my favor. It came down to the last deadlifts. I needed to make my attempt, which I did. And then the Russian competitor needed to make her attempt. She missed it, so I won. It was a pretty cool feeling to win in front of a hometown crowd with your family and friends working the competition and then being in the audience as well. In 2011, both Junior Worlds and Master Worlds were held in Canada, and I ended up going out to Master Worlds to set up as Inner Strength and just to be there to support some athletes that were competing. And we went over supper one night with Wade Hooper, who was an American. Wade had won Junior Worlds, Open Worlds, and that year he won Master Worlds. And at that point in time, as a cocky junior, I was super excited that I'd won Sub-Junior Worlds, Junior Worlds, and it came up, and I think I said to Wade that I'm gonna one-up you and I'm gonna add that Sub-Junior on, because when he was competing, Sub-Junior wasn't a thing. And I remember him saying, Open's the hardest. And at that point in time, I was kind of like, well, I'm making progress still. I'll be able to achieve it in the next few years. And then I entered Open, and the competition just kept getting harder. I knew that Open was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be a challenge to win, but I don't think I thought at that time that it was going to be as hard as it was. Over the years, obviously I had some ups and downs. Training would go well, training wouldn't go well. My motivation would be there. My motivation and love for the sport would die. But that goal was always still there to try and win Open Worlds. Whether it's stubbornness, stupidity, I don't know, but that goal still remained. And it's sort of funny to look back at some results, because there was definitely years that I wasn't even finishing on the podium, but I still had that goal in mind. Probably like through 2015-ish, I was definitely struggling with not having much passion for the sport, not really wanting to push my training. My husband, Rhaea Stinn, was coaching me at that time. It was definitely adding some stress to our relationship, and I would resist doing something and he basically wouldn't push me back, because then it would cause a disagreement between us. And definitely that affected the progress that I was making. But that goal of winning Open Worlds still remained. In 2016, 2017, Ryan and I started talking about me hiring somebody else as a coach, and it was sort of that decision of who's it going to be. By this time, classic lifting was starting to take off, so there was definitely a lot of coaches who were classic coaches, but they didn't know the gear. And still my priority was equipped lifting. After a lot of conversations about different options of coaches, I decided to reach out to Blaine Sumner and start working with him. At the time, Blaine was one of the best lifters in the IPF, having won worlds, held world records in both classic and equipped. So it was somebody who I figured I can probably trust them. I did decide to start working with him about 20 or 24 weeks before 2017 World Games. And I did that sort of in the sense of, well, if I don't like it, I can get out and still have like a 16-week or a 12-week training block leading into World Games, which was obviously a very important competition. Working with a new coach and somebody who I didn't really know or have a relationship with was definitely a good thing for me at that time. Obviously, over the years, Jeff Butt had coached me in person, so I had known him very well. Then my husband had coached me, but bringing in an outsider not only for their different perspective, but also just the accountability piece, I think was huge for me. I found working with Blaine that it definitely reignited my spark for lifting. I started to enjoy training again. From there, working with Blaine, I was able to make really good progress with him for really a whole World Games cycle that was actually a year longer because of COVID in there. So my bench skyrocketed. That was the one that had the biggest difference. And a lot of it was just pushing me to keep experimenting in the bench shirt, to try new things, try wearing it differently, and just in the gear a ton. A lot of the blocks when I was working with Blaine, I was in my bench shirt twice a week. I was in my squat suit once a week, deadlift suit once a week, all year round. It didn't matter if I was 30 weeks out from a competition. For the most part, it was a staple in training. And for me, that was just such sport-specific training and obviously what I needed at that time. I know the one thing looking back that I struggled on, like 2017-ish, I made great progress for World Games, did Worlds the following November, and my total was essentially equivalent to the total that had won the previous year, but I finished third that year because other people made progress. And that's definitely sometimes a hard thing to deal with in the sport, is that sometimes you can have your absolute best competition, but other people have a better competition. I think over the years, I've gotten better at dealing with it and have sort of learned that it's okay to be proud of your performance even if the podium placement doesn't reflect that, and to also be disappointed in your performance even though you're happy with being on the podium. I've had both sides of it, and I think it's just all a part of sport. It's learning to accept that you don't have control over podium placing, obviously. You can only do what you can do with each of your lifts, and then see where the cards fall at the end of the day. So much of it is competing against ourselves and trying to make ourselves better, because really what I do on the platform has no impact on what my competitors do on the platform. 2018 Classic Worlds were being held in Calgary, so that year I decided I wanted to try and make the open team for Classic as well as the equipped team. So nationals, I competed both Classic and equipped. It was a really tight battle in Classic, but I was able to come out on top, so I earned the national team spot. So in Classic Worlds in 2018, I finished in bronze, and then at Equipped Worlds, I finished in silver. So definitely I felt like I was climbing up the rankings within those both divisions, really. But my focus and love was still with Equipped. With the World Games coming up in 2021, 2020 would be a qualifier, so I decided for the next little while I wanted to really focus on Equipped and see where I could take my numbers. In 2019, leading into Worlds, based on the results that were happening sort of across the world in my weight class, Blaine and I decided to go up to 84 for that Worlds. It looked like it might be an easier class to move up into, and obviously the possibility of moving up also impacting my strength positively was sort of the goal leading into that time frame. That World Championship, obviously moving up a weight class, let me fuel a lot more than I had been previously. I wasn't a full 84 at the time, and just being able to eat and fuel going into the competition made me feel really good. I remember being happy with how my squats went. My bench, I missed my opener while I got it, and then the jury overturned it to a no lift, so that's obviously not a great day. I do remember like having to regroup after that opener once they overturn it. Okay, now we got to redo it on the second and just clean it up. And then deadlifts, I knew I was sort of in the lead going into deadlifts, so I just needed to pull what was put on the bar for me by my coaches. I remember coming off after my third attempt and feeling really happy with how the day went. At that point, Natalie, who was in second, still had to pull, so there was a chance that she would pull for it. Everybody else had seen her second and didn't think that she had it, but I obviously didn't know the situation, so I didn't take that time to celebrate until I knew for sure that I had won. It was obviously a great feeling to finally get that gold, something that I had been sort of eyeing and looking forward to for 10 plus years, and to finally be able to cross that off the lift was a huge milestone for me. The funny thing is though, that when you have a goal for that long, you think that your life is going to change when you achieve it. And I remember coming home from it, like everybody was excited obviously for me, but there was that moment of like nothing changed, right? My day-to-day is still the same. I'm still back in the gym trying to get stronger, because that's the ultimate goal with the sport, is always to get stronger. And that's where being able to sort of disconnect your competition results from your why, I think can be beneficial in the long term, because that's what keeps you going. Is the training is really what keeps you going. The goal then moved to qualifying for the next World Games, and then COVID hit. So there was no World Championship in 2020. So I think that allowed me to take some pressure off of myself, because there was no World Championship. So in 2021, I didn't really feel like I was the reigning world champion because it had been so long since the last World Championships. Did I want to do it again? Of course. But if I didn't, you still can't take that championship away from me. So the World Games is a multi-sport event held every 4 years. Essentially, the easy way of saying it is the Olympics for non-Olympic sports. It's an event that's recognized by the IOC, or the International Olympic Committee, and it's, I don't know how many, 30-ish sports in every games that get to come together. You are housed in an athlete village. There's an opening ceremony, a closing ceremony. So the 2009 World Games, my experience there, it was just like unlike anything else. At that time, I had been to Junior Worlds, I had been to Open Worlds, but it wasn't comparable because it's this multi-sport event. The organization of it's different. You can go watch other sports and interact with other athletes. And then there's athlete events. There was a closing ceremonies at that. In Taiwan, the auditorium that it was held in was different than anything that people were using at the time for powerlifting meets. And it was packed every day with tons of fans, whether they were fans of powerlifting or fans of the World Games, I'm not sure, but it was a full house, it was loud. It just had a different feel to it than a normal World Championship. My lifting at my first World Games didn't go well. I did a really hard weight cut at that competition, cutting 5 kilos in the last 24 hours. So my performance wasn't great, but my memories from that event are fantastic. The one thing that was a super cool experience for us is we got to walk into the closing ceremonies, and it was a bit of like a rush chaos because the buses were running late. We were supposed to be walking in with our countries, but by the time we got there, Canada was at the very front. So we were trying to catch up with them, and as we came up on the stadium, it just started getting like louder, and I remember wondering like, what is this? And then all of a sudden we came through this tunnel, and it was just walking into the stadium of I don't know how many thousands of screaming fans, people excited that everybody was walking in this parade of athletes. The closing ceremonies at the 2009 World Games would definitely be one of the highlights of my World Games experience, just because I didn't expect it, and it was just such a cool experience. After 2009 World Games, obviously the World Games was more on the radar, and then I got it in my head that, hey, like, obviously Junior Worlds was in there, winning Junior Worlds was in there, but 2013 World Games was coming, and I needed to figure out a way to qualify for that. And since then, every 4-year cycle, it's definitely been probably not the primary thought in the first 2 years after World Games, but as the qualifying year comes up, it's figuring out, making sure I'm doing the events to qualify, to give myself the best opportunity to make sure that I'm at the World Games, just because it's such a unique event, and it's a totally different experience than a regular World Championship. In 2013, to qualify for the World Games, I decided to cut down to 72 because I felt like my chances there were better. The World Games does weight classes a little bit differently, so they combine weight classes and then you're ranked based on your points. I finished 4th. My numbers weren't all-time best, but I feel like I lifted relatively well. They were my best at numbers at 72, and that was sort of the time I'd done a pretty significant cut from 84 to 72, so I was trying to still build my strength back up. And then in 2017, that was my first year, really first competition working with Blaine. 72 was still on its own, so I'd made sure I was 72 for the 16 Worlds, so that I could hopefully get a qualifying spot. My squat had made a ton of progress. Really all my lifts had made a ton of progress in the few months of working with Blaine. I ended up finishing in 5th. I was really happy with my lifting because I had had personal bests after really years of some stagnation. So at that time, like the goal wasn't to win World Games. The goal was to qualify for every World Games, get that experience, maybe finish on the podium at some point in time was really the goal. I don't even know if at that time I thought I could win a World Games. I think after winning Worlds in 2019, being on the podium at World Games was definitely a goal. As things continued to progress over the next couple of years and through the pandemic, through 2021, winning World Games definitely was something that all of a sudden I was like, this might be achievable. Training leading into 2022 World Games was probably some of the hardest training that I've done. Not so much in the training I was doing, but just in the struggles I was having physically. I was having some major elbow problems, really unable to straight bar squat without significant pain. So most of my squatting leading into that event was done with a safety bar. So it wasn't ideal training going into it. And it's sort of funny to look back because to this day, that's still my best competition. But training leading into it, training was hard. I think I was on the verge, or I was burnt out from training. I didn't love training at the time. It was definitely something I had to do because I needed to go to World Games and I needed to put my best foot forward. But my body was struggling. So the World Games competition itself in 2022. So training had been what it was leading into World Games. I was putting my best effort in that I could, but I was definitely frustrated with my body at the time. But the competition day itself went great. Squats, I was happy with what I did based on how training had gone. Bench, I set a new world record. Deadlifts, I tied my personal best, and my total was a personal best total. So I remember coming off after my third deadlift and just being thrilled with my day, really regardless of the outcome on the podium, because I wasn't the last deadlifter. I never am the last deadlifter. So I had a few minutes of that feeling while waiting for Bonica to pull her final attempt. She did, she pulled it, and the lights came up 2-1. It was a good lift. I got silver. I was still happy with how things had finished. A few seconds later, all of a sudden the jury was overturning the lift, and it was now a no lift, and now I was the gold medalist at the World Games.
A total world record and gold in the World Games. There's confirmation. Brown by 0.2 from Rhaea Stinn.
Oh, well, maybe not. There's been a massive groan in the crowd here, Rory. I think it's been taken away.
Has the jury overturned?
The MC has just announced Rhaea Stinn is on the top.
So they overturned Bonica's third attempt because they said that she wasn't locked out from the jury's perspective. So it was one of those, I was ecstatic that I was the gold medalist, but it was just a weird circumstance to move into the gold. It wasn't that immediate, it's a no lift, I get gold. So it had some strange feelings around it. So all of a sudden I went from being super thrilled with my silver medal to winning gold, but not sure that I deserve it. And it's really hard, it's really weird to think back and be like, that gold has a lot of negative things around it for me. It wasn't the way that I wanted it to go. It wasn't the way I wanted to win. And it feels really stupid to say that because it's like, you won gold, I can remove myself from it and be like, well, I had no impact on what that jury decision was. Yeah, it was just really hard to deal with. There was a lot of negative stuff going around online. And yeah, I think that it's crazy to say that that's something that should be on the highlight reel of my career, but it's not because of the negativity that surrounded it. I think that experience definitely took some of my passion for the sport out of me. So, am I a World Games champion? Yes. Would I like to do it again under different circumstances? Absolutely.
Ball hard, no lesser. This dry mind, no Tesla. This whip glide like Dressler. Full court, I bring pressure. I bring pressure. I bring pressure.